Morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this Friday's webinar. I would like to introduce my very special guest this morning, Mr. Nigel Oseland. Good morning, Nigel.
Hello.
Welcome to our webinar. I think this is number 9 or 10. I forget that how many we've done now. It's all merging into one huge, quagmire of sameness and Groundhog Day. I know I've used that expression many times. But very good morning to everybody this morning. Thank you for joining us. I know you do have obviously a plethora of options that you can choose from in webinars. Perhaps you're even webinar fatigued because there has been a lot going on, and Nigel and I are going to talk about some of that over the coming session. So as per normal, I'm just going to quickly check that you can hear us, and I'll just ask you, if you don't mind, to quickly let me know if you could hear us, both Nigel and I.
I suppose I should say something so they can check they can hear me.
Excellent. Okay, so yep, everybody can hear us, which is fantastic. So it's pretty good. I think a couple of people can't, but the majority, yes. Okay, brilliant. So you can all hear us, which is fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again for joining us on this beautiful sunny Friday morning. Great weekend ahead for the weather, which is fabulous. And of course, with the announcements yesterday, we can now obviously participate in small group events around each other's houses, provided provided that we observe social distancing, and we can use one another's toilets, which I read with interest this morning, which is brilliant, provided we clean them afterwards. But before we go hand over to Nigel, and we have a good chat with his good self. Just to remind our listeners and viewers that 2 weeks ago I had the pleasure of having Elliot on the show. Christ, I'm making it sound like I'm some sort of superstar. The webinar. And for people that missed it, you are welcome to download it on the links that are available, which we can share on our social feeds. If you can't find them, then do let me know, DM me, and I can send you those links. And likewise, if you have colleagues that can't join us this morning, or you do have to dip out at some point, then again, let us know. We can send you the link to this recording, which will be available on our YouTube channel later on. But so 2 weeks on, and we have, of course, Nigel. But before we do, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we've all suffered an element of boredom. I talked about this 2 weeks ago, but I think the fatigue has now started to set in. You'll be able to read across all sorts of spectrums at the moment in our social feeds. The advice that we're being given, and again, Nigel and I are going to talk about that in a few minutes. But there is a lot of repetitiveness, and we are now looking for those social interactions, those day-to-day activities that we want to have. And of course, I think communication is key at the moment. And I put this slide in just to give everybody a little bit of comfort that myself, we're craving the next steps. What are we supposed to be doing? How should we communicate? How should our government communicate to us? But I think as business leaders, business owners, and people who work for companies, we're looking to make sure that clear communication channel is observed, and we understand what should be happening. When is the return to the space likely to happen? How should we operate within that space? All of those good things, and we're going to talk about some of that over the coming minutes. So. Same process as normal. We will keep this to 55 minutes. We'll have you away by 12 o'clock because we do appreciate that a lot of you will have other meetings, webinars, Zoom calls, etc. to move on to. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to formally introduce Nigel. Nigel, thank you for joining me. And Nigel, just if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about Workplace Unlimited, what you get up to. Tell us about you. This is your platform now, sir.
Okay, thank you. Well, first and foremost, I'm an environmental psychologist, and I think I forgot that along my career path. But over the last 10 years, I've gone back to my original roots. So I started my formal career. I've had 2 careers. My first career, actually, I worked for the NHS, believe it or not, as a physiological measurement technician. But I worked with psychologists, and that was what inspired me to go and study psychology and then environmental psychology, and then start my.
Oh, I can't hear you, Nigel. Are you still there?
Oh, yeah, sorry, my mic went off. So I spent 10 years working with the building research establishment, investigating how we can make people more comfortable and productive in the workplace. And then I spent just over 10 years working with large corporates. I worked with an architectural practice, I worked with a facilities management company, and I worked with a lot of niche workplace consulting companies. And then for the last 10 years, I set up my own practice. And what I do on a daily basis, I do several things, but I still do a little bit of research, a little bit of commercial research, and I do like to publish, and I still do studies and publish the research results, normally around how we can enhance people's well-being and performance in the workplace. But also my day-to-day consulting practice is mostly around implementing agile working, remote working, and so on. And I tend to work on my own or with a group. I've got an associate network of HR professionals, architects, designers, IT guys. So bring them together when we need a larger team. And I work within I advise corporates at kind of international level, but also I work for the public sector, and I do a lot of work in higher education as well.
Oh, fabulous. Okay. And workplace trends. What's your involvement with the workplace trends?
There's a funny story behind that, because Workplace Trends is now an international conference. I think we're in about our 17th year, maybe something like that. And funny enough, I joined an architectural practice during one of the recessions. It was like, as I joined, people were leaving the building because they lost their work, and I was like, this is not great. And there was no work.
Sounds familiar, that.
there was no work, so I basically said to the directors there, because I wasn't a director, I was a senior, and I said, look, how about we organise a conference, bring some of our potential clients together, our existing clients, bring along our partners, people who we respect in the industry, and have this conference. And they said, good idea. We had the first conference of about 80 people, and it was held at Goldman Sachs, one of Goldman Sachs's offices, which was a bit unusual in itself. And people said that's a good idea. So every year we've done the same conference, and we've since done it in Copenhagen, New York, and India, and we're looking to take it to South Africa and Australia in the near future. Oh, and Spain. I think the next one will be in Madrid, actually. The next one outside the UK. So yeah, it's growing, and it's my idea behind Workplace Trends was to bring together people out kind of on the fringes of the workplace industry. I've got B.
The challenges of
working from home. Don't get those in the office. Yeah, so the idea was to bring in people on the fringes of the workplace industry and researchers doing related studies. So we've had anthropologists, philosophers, historians, obviously technologists, and so on. And the idea is they come in and they tell us about what may be happening now and what's going to happen in the future that will affect workplace design and management.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, people that are here, again, thank you for staying and thank you for joining us. We do have an open forum for questions, and please pose your questions at any time. And if the questions are, what I'm going to do now is I have a set of questions that I'm going to ask Nigel that he's going to talk about, give his views on. And if you do have any questions that you'd like to add and participate, please do so. And I will ask them of Nigel if it's relevant at the point. If not, I'll wrap it up at the end of the session. But I've got a comment here that somebody says, Nigel, you'll never be part of a quagmire to me. So that must be flattery, and which is excellent. Okay, so first question, and I've asked this of all of my guests on the webinar. Obviously, this big forced social experiment, sudden change in work dynamic. How have you dealt with it? What have you been doing? And are you fatigued, or are you actually enjoying it? How are you feeling at the moment?
Yeah, it's a great question. Nice one to open with. I mean, to be honest, for me, it's not massive change, because I've been promoting agile, flexible working for 20 years or more. I've always balanced working from home and then working with my clients. So obviously the balance has shifted now more towards the working from home than working alongside face-to-face with clients in their premises. But what I've been doing is, I've just replaced the face-to-face with the Zoom calls and the Teams calls, to be fair. So for me, it's not been a massive change other than the actual face-to-face, almost physical contact. I always say that I love the fact that we can do these webinars now, we can do the Zoom meetings, we're all getting used to those rather than being on one of those horrible teleconference calls where there's 12 people on the call and you haven't got a clue what's happening and you feel left out of things. But at least with the Zooms you can start to pick up on some of the non-verbal communication, non-verbal language, which I think is really important. But I kind of have this little phrase about, I still think you have to see people face to face, because you almost have to smell them, you almost have to be part of the pheromones and all that other body language that's going on. So I am missing that. I mean, at heart I'm slightly extroverted, so I do get a buzz out of social interaction. I do find the Zoom meetings, if you do too many in a day, that can get quite tiring. There's something about the screen time that definitely affects your kind of motivation and how alert you are. But I think it's all about balance. I've always said that. It's about maybe schedule yourselves with a couple of meetings during the day, so you've got that interaction. Call people up. People love a phone call at the moment, or a Zoom call. They are open to calls. So have that little coffee with them online, and also use this time to just do that heads down work, that focused work without distractions, which you may not have been able to do when you were in a busy office. So I'm not fatigued yet. I'm getting a bit bored, but I'm getting bored in the evenings. I'm not getting bored during the day. It's plenty to do during the day. But because I'm working from home, I'm finding that I'm kind of twiddling my thumbs by about 4 o'clock because I've done everything I set out to do, which would have normally taken me like 9 hours. And then I find I'm like, well, what do I do now? I'm used to like getting home at 8 o'clock at night if I'm working in London, and now I'm at home at 4 o'clock. I'm ready for what should we do? We'll go for a walk, or that kind of thing.
So I've got a great question already. So dear friend of ours, and he was on the webinar a few weeks ago now, Mr. Mark Elchingham. He has asked, what effect do you think the good weather has had on people's experience of working from home? Would it have been different if it happened in a damp and grey January?
It's a good question, because I think the good weather has certainly made working from home 5 days a week more palatable. And as I said, it means that if you do finish your work chores early, you can go and sit in the garden and enjoy it and enjoy the weather or whatever. So, and how many more people seem to be just outside enjoying a stroll, enjoying a walk? So obviously, if there wasn't the good weather, that would certainly dampen our enthusiasm for it. So I think it's a good point. I think the weather has helped. But I also firmly believe that as human beings, we are particularly good at adapting to change. And I think whatever is thrown at us, if it was bad weather and lockdown, I think we would have adapted in some way to make it more tolerable.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I just want to quickly ask about what's happened. Obviously, we've come into lockdown, as we mentioned, and I've asked a very similar question to all of the people that have joined me so far. But how have you coped as a business? What's happened? Have you had to put anything else in place? How are you generally finding it? And any tip tricks you want to share?
Okay, well, I think this situation has affected us all. So I've lost some of my speaking gigs at conferences, which is like, for me, it's one of the favourite parts of my job, is going overseas and presenting and meeting new people and getting a little bit immersed in the culture as good as you can. So that certainly had an effect, and I've had several projects go on hold. They've just said, look, let's wait and see what happens. But fortunately for me, I've got one client who has continued, and they're probably they're getting a little bit more out of me than maybe if I'd have been juggling 3 projects. They're getting more face time out of me, so they're doing well. But what was fascinating about that project is it's an agile working project in a higher education institution, and before lockdown, I was there doing the change management to try and transition people to basically a hot desking environment and so on. And no interest at all. People saying this can't work, it doesn't work for us, it's not the right environment, forget it. And now they're like, yeah, this kind of works, we can do this. We don't want to do it full time, 5 days a week, but we like the idea of maybe working from home 2 or 3 days a week. That's quite nice. So weirdly, COVID-19 has made my job my day job, my consulting practice, transitioning people to agile working easier.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, Nigel, because obviously you and I in the same arena, we've been talking about this for years, and I know we're going to come on to that in a minute, but you're quite right. All of a sudden, people, perhaps people that were a little bit reticent to this agile concept previously, they had maybe trust issues, there was a skills gap, whatever it may be. All of a sudden, I think people are now looking at it and think, well, actually, okay, it's maybe somewhat optimism rather than pessimism now, that these disparate workforces can indeed work, collaborate, and communicate as well. But I'm going to ask you more about that in a minute. But I think what I would like to just focus on, and really the next couple of questions do focus on the title of the webinar today. But what I will do as well for our listeners, I am going to post now the link to Nigel's blog in the chat forum here. But just talk to me about it. I read it with interest. Talk me through what you were talking about in your blog and your thoughts around that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. It was. It took me a while to do the blog. I mean, I think I only put it out there 1 or 2 weeks ago, which means there'd been at least 6 weeks of lockdown prior to me putting something to paper, and I think it's just because I couldn't quite get my head around what was happening, and then someone said to me and said, "Well, how come you've not commented on this? You're there's lots of commentary out there," and I've been watching the commentary from afar. I've just been sitting back and seeing what's happening. And it was actually Boris's speech that made me think I've got to respond. So, but I've just been seeing the stuff come through, and I just thought it's all very knee jerk. It's all very, oh, you've got to do this and we've got to do it now. And I just like, well, hold on, let's just think about workplace. So I think it is important to look at short-term and long-term solutions. But what I was trying to get across in my blog is that there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction now, but actually there's a lot of good practice design that we've been saying for 20 plus years that has just been continuously ignored. And I think that the two key ones for me are, firstly, the whole idea around densifying space, reducing space, continuously reducing space to save money, and not looking at the consequences to people and organizations of doing that. So in the blog I put some figures down for the BCO density figures, and you can see that over about 10 years we've basically across the whole building lost the equivalent of 2 desks per person of space, 2 desks per person of space. So we're constantly making buildings more denser. Part of that is the reducing desk sizes. So when I was worked for that architect's practice, I had the luxury of a 2 by 1 meter desk. Well, that's my 2 meters bubble of isolation, of distancing. Sorry. So and now the standard is 1400, and I kid you not, I've worked with clients who are saying we could introduce 1 meter desks. So why would you want to introduce a 1 meter desk? What do these people do? Oh, they're either on the phone or they're doing focused work, and you want to put them within everyone's personal space bubble. So with densifying buildings, we've been doing it for years, and that has a knock-on effect on acoustics. It affects the thermal capacity of the building. Obviously, it affects egress and toilets, but we do have to legally deal with that. It certainly affects cross-infection, and so my first point is why we've constantly chasing density and reducing costs, and not having something that is actually a little bit more sustainable and will suit us under different circumstances. And then the other one, it's back to the agile working and the home working, and so I'm a big advocate of that, because I think if you do want to save a little bit of money, get your space efficiencies, I think the way to do it isn't through densification. The way to do it is by offering people generous space, good space, welcoming space, attractive space when they're in the office. But what you can do to save on a little bit of space is offer the full remote working package with occasional home working, working in third spaces like cafes, libraries. I'm talking old days, but it'll come back, believe me. So the idea is that then through the remote working and introducing desk sharing, you can then reduce the space requirements. But at least when people are in the space, they're getting a very good environment that is good for their well-being, health and performance.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the two main points in that blog. There are other ones as well, like I really have an issue with designers who insist on low or no desk screens. Again, I always came at it from the acoustics point of view, but if you've got an absorptive desk panel that covers the mouth, but not the eyes, so you can still see people, but at least covers the mouth, that stops noise transmission. And guess what? It stops you being sneezed and coughed on as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's lots of questions that are coming to mind, but I know that I've got them coming up, so I'll just ask this one. But I mean, in your blog and the solutions you've just talked about, it's really and truly, a lot of it is not new, is it? And had we have listened and had we have adopted these policies, these processes, the agile concept, we wouldn't perhaps be in the challenge that we are in now. I mean, it's not new, is it? We've been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that if we'd have done what we've been saying for years, it would stop COVID-19 and stop all the infection, but it may have slowed it down a bit. And let's face it, this is all about flattening the curve. But I just think that, and okay, COVID-19 is a particularly bad one, but every year there are flu viruses. We've got the problem of people turning up to work because they feel they have to turn up to work even when they're ill. Whereas actually, why couldn't you just dial in, do a Zoom call, whatever? If you've got that important meeting for that one day, stay at home and get better. Okay, you can still have a meeting if you feel obliged to. You can still do some light admin work and online work. You're still working if you want, because a lot of us have strong work ethic. We feel like we want to work, but you don't have to be physically present in the office spreading your germs to do that. So a lot of it is, some of it's about design and just allowing that little bit of low density, and some of it is about management style and leadership as well, and moving away from presenteeism, moving away from managing by sight and managing by time to managing by results. We can implement all that, and I think that would have just slowed things down a little bit. And I think it's good practice because, okay, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to get over this COVID thing in different ways, but we've still got to think about all those other flu viruses. Every 3 or 4 years we have a particularly bad flu virus that wipes out a lot of people, and I just think we're over densifying the office. In the animal kingdom, when an animal nest, I'm trying to think of the word, a den, when it gets overpopulated, you get disease, and the disease flattens the population. And I know that sounds a little bit weird, but we are animals. Ultimately, we are mammals. And I don't know, is there something about the fact that when you overpopulate, the disease is going to spread more? So in the office, reduce that density.
And you raise an interesting point there, Nigel. I think we have, for some reason, the Western world inbred in our ward system that we believe that we have to be present. For some reason, and certainly, of our generation, there is this presenteeism is key. And is it a trust issue? Is it a trust gap? Is it a skills gap that exists within C-suite? Middle management, because they think that somebody's got to be present to do their work, when, as you say quite rightly, we talk about this in both of our fields of expertise, that you don't have to be present to be doing your work. It's management by output nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of Peter Principle. So whenever I implement agile working, flexible working, the people at the top of the organization, the C-suite, as you call them, they kind of get it. They can see the big picture benefits. A lot of the people at the grassroots level, they can also see their benefits. If you do it properly, they can say, okay, I can save a little bit of time on travel. I get a bit more work-life balance. I can, I can get my work done without my boss looking over me and all this. So they kind of get it as well. But the people who struggle is that middle management layer, and they just see it as it's an extra burden. It's like, oh my gosh, right now I can't even see them, and you want me to manage them. And I just think that's due to lack of training in management, because what most of us do, not all, but we go to a university, whatever, we get qualified at college, whatever, in a particular discipline or particular profession, and we strive to become the best and the top of our profession. And it seems just as we do that, someone turns around and goes, "You're really good at doing what you do, so can you now do it with those 10 people over there and show them how to do it?" And it's like, but I didn't. I'm rubbish at people, mate. I haven't had any training. I don't know how to do this. That's a very different skill set to me being the best in my profession, whatever that profession is. So I think that's the issue. And I think the only way, again, on majority, because some organisations are very good at training, but the way most of us learn how to manage is the way that we were managed. So you get a perpetual cycle of managing by sight and presenteeism and not trusting your staff because that's how you were managed. Okay, we're creatures of habits and animals. We learn from our parents. We learn from senior people. We follow suit generally.
Yeah, and you make an interesting. I mean, we could talk about this for hours actually, but it's interesting that you say that, because again, we believe that our career path, the trajectory of our career path, should be we start, we grow, we go up the ladder, and that ladder leads to middle management, executive board level, etc. Rather than perhaps concentrating on just being very good at what you do, being best in class. But of course, a lot of people, we're not trained like that. We are taught by our peers and parents that you have to go up the career ladder, and you're quite right that the best in class doesn't also make the best in class manager.
No, and I mean, again, a few organisations do it. Depends on the organisation, but not many allow you to just become better and better in your profession and become an expert or whatever, and get rewarded for that. I think we have to. Unfortunately, most of us get into this trap of we want a bigger house, we want children, and we want a big car, and so you want higher remuneration, and if you can't do that through being the best of the best, you have to do it by being a manager. That's one of my theories.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So next question. I call it social noise. I know when we talked yesterday, it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. This social noise, the good advice that's masquerading as something else. But there's a lot of stuff that we can read, and I choose the polite S word there, as in stuff. I wrote a blog about this a couple of weeks ago about the new normal. I don't think it's the new normal. It's the new abnormal, isn't it? That we're in this space now that is not right. It's not normal. It is abnormal.
I struggle with this whole concept and what is normal and what's not normal or abnormal. I mean, for me, normal is just normal's what becomes everyday common. The norm is set by a standard. I'm thinking of the norm in terms of standards and how we raise standards. So we always have higher expectations, so the standards rise, and then we want to rise, so the standards become the normal where we're at, and then we want another set of standards, so it's constant improvement. So I kind of think of it like that. It's about, as human beings, it's about us adapting to change, and it's about that becoming our new level of expectation. And so I don't have a big issue with the new normal. It's just it will become normal anyway, and I don't think what we're going through. I think what we're going through right now is abnormal, but I think what's going to come out of this is, it's like anything. We've seen extremes. We saw what we were doing before, presenteeism, be in the office every day, and now we're seeing can't be in the office. And those are the two extremes. And I think, like all things, we will find the natural, optimal way forward. I've got faith that we can do this as human beings. And I think what we also have to, and again, I'm in psychology statistics, you're always thinking of that bell curve, the normal distribution. And where are people on that, and how's that normal distribution moving? And I think you have to recognise that it's a bell shape for a reason. There's always going to be outliers, and there's going to be people who do things different. So whilst there will be a new way of doing things, it's not going to be the same for everyone. Some people will change and some people won't. We've seen the surveys where people saying they don't want to come back to the office, and others saying they can't wait to come back, and that's human nature. There's poles, but I think there will be this optimal solution in the middle, which will be a more balanced approach, like you said, where managers now realise that their staff can be productive away from the office. It doesn't have to be at home, but away from the office. So if they're productive, I can trust them now, and maybe I can adapt my management style to accommodate this new way forward.
Absolutely, that's exactly. And I think this, it leads me very nicely onto this social noise, and you've made some comments there that we're going to come back to in a couple of questions time. But this whole replanning that is again masquerading as good advice on our social feeds, the social noise. That is just a false economy. It's just a temporary fix, isn't it? Are we putting on a band-aid on the real problem?
Yeah. Again, I said right at the start, I think there's a knee-jerk reaction, which let's convert that to a short-term solution, and then there's the longer-term, more sustainable solution. I think the stuff in my blog was about the longer-term sustainable solution. Let's lower the densities. Let's start introducing agile working. Let's just start to do best practice rather than just designing offices because they're a cost burden. Think of them as actually a place to support your organization and make your people better. So I think we probably will have to do some of the band-aid stuff because it'll just give some people comfort. But I don't think that's the long-term solution. And my advice is I wouldn't redesign your office or anything. If you've got the opportunity to reduce the density, do that, because I think we need to do that now long term. But in the short term, my recommendation would be, right, every other desk. So use each desk every other day. Have half your people at home, half your people coming in the office. Rotate the desks with good cleaning overnight, and that will reduce the density. So now people have got the space of 2 desks rather than 1. And when they're at their desk, they're getting their physical distancing. Which the physical social distancing is an interesting thing in itself, but because we don't want social distancing, we want social connection. what we want is physical distancing. So that's my solution, is that we can do this kind of alternative desks, and also if we have it so when you stagger the use of the desk, there's no one sitting opposite you. That adds another little bit of separation. But I can kind of see how people might want to do things in the short term. Again, I said we need the barriers that cover the mouth, but I would invest in those. I don't think you necessarily need full screens and enclosed offices, but some humans might prefer that short-term comfort.
And I think. Yeah, it's all about it's the fear of return, isn't it, that people talk about now? It's how does one give our user group the comfort that we have as business owners, advisors, adapted the workplace to ensure their safety? And I think that's the challenge that we have. And if we had known coming into Christmas, we would have all bought shares in Perspex suppliers, I think.
I say it's a good short-term solution, but I'm not sure. Again, we can come on to human nature and how long will this behaviour change stick? And again, research suggests to me that unless you're on this every day, and unless COVID continues at the level it's at, and I haven't seen any evidence for the. We're already seeing behaviour change. We're already seeing people slackening. As soon as we've been given a little bit of rain, we've taken full rain. We're going out. We're going to the parks. People are walking. The social distancing or physical distancing is reducing. People aren't wearing masks anyway. So unless you're on it all the time, and unless there's an immediate reason for this change, so as animals, we have to see immediate reward. to continue a certain behaviour. And the problem we've got with things like COVID, it's not visible and it's not immediate. It's 2 weeks down the line or whatever that you get the effects. So that's going to making these changes, these behavioural changes in particular, difficult to stick. And I say I just think there's other ways of doing this without putting people in boxes in their offices. And to be honest, the biggest problem we got, the biggest challenge I think, and I don't have an answer for this right now, is how people get to the office and how they get, once they're at the office, how do they get to their desk with physical distancing? That's the one I can't work out, because most, we can do the one-way circulation, but if you've ever been to Canary Wharf at a lunchtime and seen the queues for the lifts, the thought that people are going to walk 30 floors to their office or going to get in a lift 2 people at a time, I just can't see that. And I don't know what the answer is to that one. I really don't. I think once they're in the space, we can help them, but I don't know how we get them to the space.
Well, I've talked about this. I think I talked about it with Mark again a few weeks ago, and certainly with guests so far as well. Is that we can control the internal environment, but of course it's the external environment that we have no control of. So the moment one leaves their own home, the safety of their home, and they're on public transport, they're getting into the concierge area, the reception areas, into the lifts. That's all part of the process of coming to the workplace. But we have no control of that. So there are other mitigating circumstances and factors we have to consider. Sorry, I'll ask you that in a second. But I think I love your analogy there about that biggest change, and we need to see change immediately. And I often say, like you do, but when I'm meeting people and we talk about that change management, that's why if you're looking to lose weight and you do employ the services of a PT or a professional, the immediate 1 week weigh-in is the biggest one, because you see the biggest effect. And a lot of people realize, well, that's just water retention, but it motivates you to stay on track because you can see that immediate effect. And that's exactly what you're talking about in terms of change management, isn't it?
Yeah.
So a good couple of questions coming in. I'll ask those in a minute. Thank you from Jan and Steve. I will come back to you. But again, going back to the stuff that we read in our social feeds and social noise, what's the biggest myth you've read or heard, and what has made you laugh?
I think that in terms of what's on offer, the one I'm really struggling with is the arrows in the carpets. So changing your carpet tiles for arrows.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of effort to do that, and I'm sure a little bit of signage would suffice. But also it's back to the behaviours, and I don't know whether people will stick to it anyway. Oh damn, I'm going down the wrong way. I better turn around and go all the way around. There'll be the kind of scuffling in the corridor type arrangement. So I think that's quite a funny one. And the other one I'm not sure about is the idea of the big sheets of blotting paper that you put on your desk whenever you go to your desk. I don't know if you've seen that. So the idea is that going to the office, you tear off a big sheet of paper and put it on your desk, like a picnic tablecloth or something, and you work at that, and then you throw it away at the end of the day. And I just think, why don't you just clean the desks overnight and give people alcohol wipes or whatever? Do we really need big rolls of picnic?
A bit like a doctor's surgery. So is it a bit like a doctor's surgery when you go on the bed and they've got the towel? Okay, I've not seen that. There you go. Another concept that we can again shares in toilet roll. Had we have known? Yeah. Okay. So I suppose the $1 million question. So this is the one, isn't it? This is the utopia. And if we could answer this question, I'm sure we would be incredibly wealthy. But what does the future of the office look like?
So I'm thinking that in 2 levels. The first is that I still subscribe that we need offices, because offices are particularly great at bringing people together. They're good for mentoring. They're good for loyalty to the organisation. They're good for social cohesion, for connectedness. A lot of research I've done. Workplace loneliness is a big problem at the moment, and people who spend more time out of the office, they're more susceptible to loneliness. Hey, who'd have thought that? So Yeah. So workplace is really important for bringing people together and connecting us and so on. But also, I've talked about it before. You do need places where people can come and focus and concentrate as well, because not everyone has the privilege of being able to work from home without distraction, without children or flatmates or even other personal distractions, because some of us are just more easily distracted. So I just keep coming back to, it's got to be this balance. We offer this variety of work settings. We offer choice and fully empower people and trust them to choose to work when and where they are most productive, not what suits the manager, but where they are most productive, because at an organizational level, that's more important. Individual performance leads to organizational performance. So back to my whole point, I think we just need to listen to what workplace strategists have been saying for the last 20 years, or that Frank Duffy was saying in, what was it, the mid-80s. This kind of world of different, almost activity-based working was the start of that, wasn't it? But provide people different work settings, give them freedom to work where they're most effective, and don't think that everyone wants the same. Again, a lot of my research is just about respecting differences in terms of personality, for one, and how people are responding different to this crisis, and introverts maybe faring better than extroverts in terms of working from home, that kind of thing. But respect that in the workplace as well. And also, I think in terms of trends coming through, there's obviously all the biophilic design trends, but also I think a big thing going forward is inclusivity and diversity, and actually creating spaces for a much more diverse workforce in terms of gender, generation, and neurodiversity.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, I always say the office is like a church, isn't it? I mean, the church is, and I'm not one to start preaching here about, believer or non-believer, but the church has been around for forever. And because we believe it, we trust it, and it's a place that people go, not necessarily to pray, but of course it is an important part of it. But the large part of it, of course, is that social interaction. And I think the office is similar in that respect, that we go there for our fixes.
It's a sense of belonging is really, it's one of those, Maslow's hierarchy, basic human needs. Sense of belonging is in there. But having purpose is really important. Work's all about having purpose. It gives us something to do with reward.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So there's lots of surveys that are being published at the moment suggesting that users will resist coming back to the workplace. I think people are saying, there was something I read yesterday on social media, on LinkedIn again. I do other stuff apart from spend time on LinkedIn, believe me. But they were saying that 34%, I think it was, of people are now saying they don't want to come back to the office. But of course, if you flip it on its head, that's 66% people do want to go back to the office. Yeah. So it's marketing spin, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a bit of marketing spin, and you can always work in thirds, can't you? You're 2/3 extreme and a third in the middle. It's dead easy.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to look underneath some of those statistics. I know BCO produced some statistics, and the headline was "People don't want to come back to the office." But when you looked at it, what they were saying is they don't want to work from home 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Sorry, that is the other way around. But they were saying they don't want to work from home 5 days a week. And I think that's right. I think most of us, not all, but most of us would not want to work from home for 5 days a week. But I think the idea of 2 days a week or 3, even for some, probably appeals. And also, I think the 4-day week is on the horizon anyway. It's not going to be long before we have the 4-day week as the norm, back to the new normal. so it might be 4 days a week working, with 1 day working from home and 2 or 3 in the office. It could be that. That could be the balance.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think a lot of us will take on board the fact that our personal lives have improved because of the lockdown. So we no longer have our commute. We can be at home. We can run the children to nursery, play school, whatever it may be. We're at home. So of course we like that. But I do concur exactly what you're saying. I think we still need to go to those places, those gatherings, the churches, the office, the learning centres, that I think that we should call them as well. And I think people will want to come back. And I'm going to just ask a question here. Actually, Jan has asked a question. Do you think there'll be organisations that have spent thousands on creating the 6-foot office who'll get caught out because before everybody's reduction and social distancing of 1 metre, when we go back to as it was before, is that likely to happen?
Well, I think that's kind of underlying of what a lot of what I was saying in the blog. I think there's a knee-jerk reaction, and actually think about a sustainable solution. So as I said, you can kind of use every other desk for now, and then when this blows over, then bring people back in. I don't think you have to go to the full-on extreme of the 6 metre bubble, 2 metre bubbles, and all the rest of it. I would say, whatever you do now, think about how is that going to help you in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
There might be a few little things we've got to, but I think the things we have to do are more behavioural than design. There's behaviour things we have to do, and don't get me wrong, design can help nudge those behaviours. I'm a big fan of nudging, and we can use design to help people adapt and change to these new behaviours. But I personally think that there's easier solutions. You can just adapt what you've got without a whole new investment.
Yeah, I agree, and I know one hates to paraphrase Simon Sinek, but his great book where it's to start with why. I was speaking to somebody this week, and I said, why are you looking to bring people back to the office? What is the reason for doing that?
Yeah.
And when you've answered that question effectively, purposefully, and given you a real reason, rather than just being trust and presenteeism, okay, then work around that. Can you lead with the digital first policy, as you said? Yeah.
Because that's really, really important. What you've just again what you've said. But the big change here is what the managers of the leadership team have learned. They've learned that they can trust their staff to be productive away from the office, and that's probably the thing that's going to have the biggest impact on how we use workspace going forward.
Absolutely, yeah. So the big question, and you mentioned it, loneliness, workplace loneliness, of course, is high on the agenda. Everybody's talking about it at the moment. They do feel quite isolated. How do we remain connected? But how do you and how have you been advising people to create that fostering culture during lockdown? But if we were to adopt a long-term working from home policy like the big media companies are starting to talk about, everyone knows who they are. How can you create an inclusive culture?
So first, just on this idea that everyone works from home is as bad as everyone has to come in the office. They're these two extremes again, and the thing is, if that's a dictate, there's going to be people who it just grates with them. It just doesn't work. The whole point of agile, smart working, flexible working is it's about choice and flexibility. It's about you being in control, you choosing the best place to be and work, not you shall. I hate it when organisations saying, "Oh, we're going to introduce home working," and they're working from home on Wednesday and they're working from home on Thursday, and they dictate the times. To be honest, I think we might have to do that in the short term. We might have to do the 50-50 split, but long term, it's probably not sustainable. So I always say that you've got to, in terms of sustaining remote working, you have to just come up with the surrogates for this kind of connectivity. So I would, for senior managers, have those team meetings. You definitely need a weekly team meeting, and that might be a Monday morning or a Friday afternoon. But I would schedule in a team meeting, and I would make it compulsory. I think people would have to have a good excuse not to attend, and they can attend remotely or attend physically. But that kind of keeps everyone together. You do a round of where you're at, what you're working on, and if you do it later on, if you do it in the afternoon rather than Monday morning, you could then combine it with a bit of a social as well. So I've been having meetings where we've done the hours meeting, but we've done it at 4 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock we've all kind of got a beer or a glass of wine and just had a little chat. So so there's that. There's the back to the working by results. If you set people short-term goals and objectives, it motivates people. It depends on where they are in their career and what skills they have. But again, it's just we all like working to a deadline. It kind of helps us. It keeps us motivated. It keeps us on track. It's brilliant because you can say to your manager, "I agreed to do this, and I've done it." and then you get that satisfaction reward that you've done something, rather than things just kind of dwindling on. So also I think it's good for just to have the occasional phone call. So if you've got a really tight knit team, you might want to call them just late afternoon and just say, how's it going? What's happening today? So it's all about connecting. We can connect virtually. The beauty of this is that we've all met each other. We've all worked with each other. So we all know each other. So it actually makes virtual connection much easier. But where virtual meetings really stuff is when you've never met the person face to face. So you haven't understood their mannerisms and their quirkiness, and you haven't socialized with them. Once you've got all that out the way, you can have these meetings. So and I think the visual, it's really important to do it visually as well.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a good couple of questions coming in, and mind you, that it's obviously great talking to you. We're quickly running out of time, but so I'm going to go to Veronica. Veronica, good morning to you. Thank you for posting your question. And she asked, do you think there needs to be more courses on regenerative leadership to help nudge managers to be comfortable with more flexible, adaptive work practices?
Yes.
Yeah.
Done. Right after that course, but no, I think I say it is a bit unfair that we put the whole remote working thing on the middle managers without giving them any training. I think it is needed. It's different. Although I don't know who's on the call, but so we do this how to manage remote workers course, but what we found is that if you're a good manager and you've got basic management skills, it's not an issue. It's just if you don't have basic management skills and you don't know how to manage people, then being remote just is exponential problems. So how you manage remote workers is actually just a how you manage people course.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so Veronica just posted another comment rather than question. She said, "Could you develop some training packages for them, then, please?"
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Now, Jan's asked another question. I don't actually quite understand this question, so I'm going to ask it to you in the hope that you understand it. And she asked, do you think the 4-10 fortnight for the reduction of spread will help people understand the potential for 4-day week that we've tried to show the benefits of for ages?
Yeah. So it's just another form of flexible working. Did you call it 4-10 fortnight? But there's people who do. There's different ways of people working and different days that they can work. So I think it's one to try. It might be that there's all these different ways of flexible working, shift working. I'm not a big fan of shift working, but again, if you want to use your maximize the utilization of your building, the alternative is that you have shifts, isn't it? You have 3 8-hour shifts and you use your building for 24 hours a day and it's only 30% occupied at any one time. Brilliant. But who would want to do that? It's a horrible idea. And how do you get there? But so yeah, I think there's lots of different ways that we can experiment with the reducing the numbers, reducing the density, and I forget what you call it, but those kind of systems also work.
Yeah.
Can work.
Yeah. So she just put 4-10 fortnight means you're away from the office by the time you become contagious. Okay.
Yeah.
Get it. Yeah. Okay. So minded, we're quickly running out of time, Nigel. This is flown by. So I mean, 2 more questions I want to ask you is if we had the benefit of hindsight and we could go back to pre-COVID. What would you have implemented, and would you advise clients any differently? What advice would you have given them if we could go back in time?
That's a tough one. I mean, when I read that, I was immediately thinking of listen to the scientists and act sooner, but that's not the question, is it? So I think it just comes back to my original comment about, look, we know what best practice design is. There's a big difference between designing a space to save money and save space and designing a space to maximize the performance, well-being and health of your occupants. And we need to stop focusing on just reducing space and cost to max benefiting the primary purpose of a building is to facilitate the activities of the people in it, whatever that building is. So for an office, it's to facilitate, to maximize the output of the people in that business. So why are we creating spaces which don't do that, which hinder us by either making us ill or by not making us productive? And I didn't even mention it before, the other one, okay, because we're in cities and our cities are polluted, we have to have air-conditioned spaces. But then what happens is we turn down the fresh air circulation rate. So instead of having 100% fresh air, which is actually treated outdoor air, it's not fresh, but instead of having 100% fresh air, we recirculate the air in the building. This was the primary cause of sick building syndrome all those years ago, because managers wanting to save a little bit of money turned down the recirculation, so basically spread whatever was in the atmosphere around the building. We can't do that anymore. It's got to be so just keep thinking about, how do I design the space to maximize the performance of my people? It's got nothing to do with saving money. If you can't afford to be in that building, move out of it and go and occupy a shed in the north or something. That's the way to save money. If you're going to be in a space, create a good space for people so they can perform. Absolutely.
Okay. So one final question from me. Will we forget? I mean, I've asked this of all of the guests so far on the webinar. Do you think that, give it 6 months, 12 months, whatever that time frame is, how quickly will we forget, and how quickly will we be back to where we were before?
I have a very pessimistic view here. I just think it's human nature that we forget really quickly. As I said earlier, unless we're constantly reminded and constantly rewarded for good behaviour, we will very soon forget. When you look, I was looking at some of the early kind of operant conditioning experiments that psychologists did, and unless you're taking a constant reward, the behaviour just tails off massively. Anecdotally, I'm just seeing it now. People are already forgetting. They're just out there now, and they're not following the rules. Even government advisors aren't following the rules. So
that's contentious. Yeah.
So we will forget unless we just keep nudging and just reminding people and repeating the behaviour. And I'm going to put my guess at Christmas.
Yeah,
we'd have forgotten about Christmas.
I've just had a comment from Louise, and I mentioned this to you yesterday, didn't I? About was it maybe you, maybe somebody else, but about if people did remember, people wouldn't have a second child, would they? So ladies wouldn't have a second child if they remembered the sheer pain that they went through. So that
there's a statistic. There's various statistics, but one of the ones is so smokers who suffer heart attack and have basically said, if you don't stop smoking, you will have a heart attack and die. 60% of them return to smoking.
Yeah,
sometimes we're not very clever as an adaptive race. Sometimes I think we forget the basics.
Absolutely. Okay, so Nigel, I'm going to thank you very much indeed for your time. We're going to bring it to a close, minded that people are going to be dropping off now and going to other meetings. But very quickly, what next for you guys, and where can we? I've posted the link to the blog within the chat forum here. But what next for you, and where can we find you?
So I'd say I've got a nice client who we're about to implement agile working for. Once we get them back in the office, they're looking at obviously when we can get them back in, but we're going through all this and it's all live. And I've also I was working with a bank before this all happened. They were adamant they didn't want to do agile working or hot desking. Now they said, can I come in and help them implement agile working, because it seems silly not to do it. So I think workplace strategists and workplace consultants and those who've been promoting agile working for some time are going to be busy in the autumn rolling this out. I'm also looking forward to getting back to some of the conferences. I've had so many conferences cancelled and they've gone online, and I just want to get back out on the road to all those wonderful countries and just see people and tell people what I believe in and learn a little bit about them as well.
Absolutely, exactly. We should catch up on that separately. But Nigel, thank you very much indeed. It's been great having you on the webinar this week. Thank you very much indeed to everybody else that's been here. Thank you for joining us. And as usual, this will be available on our social links later on if you had to drop out or people have missed it. But once again, thank you. Have a great weekend all. Be safe, be careful, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.